The sound was not the snap of a neck, but the thud of a bronze door closing on everything familiar. Alexandria, 41 BC. The year was still new, but the verdict was ancient. Arsinoë IV, the younger sister of Queen Cleopatra, was being dragged from the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus, violating sanctuary and sacred law. She was 18, a former queen herself, a defeated rival in the Alexandrian War, and now a living trophy. The soldier, a grim, efficient tool of Mark Antony, did not look at her face. He looked only at the golden serpent bracelet coiled around her left wrist, a Ptolemaic symbol she refused to remove. It was the only flash of Egypt the Roman world would ever see again. Antony had a clear order from Cleopatra: bring her back or silence her. But the fate waiting for Arsinoë was a third, colder option. Why did Cleopatra need her sister not just dead, but unseen? And what evidence of Arsinoë's existence did the victor seek to destroy? Sometimes, the worst fate is to be unmade. If you enjoy these dark histories, the quiet cruelties written in forgotten stone, leave a like and subscribe and comment below where you're listening from. And now, back to the story. The path from the sanctity of the Ephesian temple was not to a Roman cage, but to an exile that was a form of living death. Arsinoë was taken not to Rome, but deep into the Roman East, a world of shifting provincial control. The institutional control began immediately, a slow, methodical scrubbing of identity. Her name, Arsinoë, the very echo of the Ptolemaic dynasty, was deemed dangerous. The records suggest she was referred to only by a title, Regina Deleta, the erased queen, a placeholder denoting not a person, but a problem solved. The officials managing her transfer, likely Roman prefects in the province of Asia, meticulously cataloged every piece of Egyptian insignia, every personal letter. Everything was seized and sent to Alexandria, except for one thing: the heavy golden serpent bracelet she had refused to surrender in Ephesus. It remained on her wrist, a secret weight under the coarse Roman woolen tunic she was forced to wear. She was housed in a remote villa, likely near the modern city of Miletus, a place chosen for its isolation, surrounded by hills and the cold, unyielding silence of provincial stone. This was not a dungeon, but a gilded cage designed for mental corrosion. The guards were instructed to maintain perfect neutrality: no conversation, no kindness, no cruelty. Just the monotonous existence of an object under observation. This was the system's weapon: the deprivation of human connection, the constant low-level dread of the unseen executioner. In this enforced silence, a quiet will to resist surfaced, not as a cry for help, but as a deliberate routine. Arsinoë, stripped of her royal trappings, began to treat her confinement as a spiritual observance. She would trace the serpent bracelet with her thumb during the long, echoing nights, a wordless reaffirmation of the name they tried to take. She did not rail against Cleopatra or Antony, but against the silence itself. She knew that if she vanished quietly, the erasure would be complete. The only mercy offered was the promise of comfort and safety. If she would sign a letter acknowledging Cleopatra as the sole rightful heir, relinquishing all claim, and providing a final, formal condemnation of her past actions. It was an offer to trade her dignity for a slightly softer cage. The hidden price was her memory. Can a name survive when all who speak it are afraid? The serpent bracelet was the heavy, cold reminder of what she was fighting to keep. She made no grand, defiant gestures. She simply refused to touch the proffered ink, day after day. The stone villa remained silent, the Roman guards perfectly still. The battle was fought inside, against the corrosive pressure of being forgotten while still alive. Silence does not always mean consent. The condition was finally stated openly, not by Cleopatra's messenger, but by a chillingly precise Roman prefect sent from Asia Minor. He arrived with scrolls, sealing the villa for days. His voice was flat, devoid of passion, listing the options in the cold light of the central courtyard. The condition was stark: convert, comply, versus vanish, suffer. She was to sign the prepared document, a formal renunciation of her royal lineage and a pledge of fealty to Cleopatra, confirming the sole, unchallenged rule of the seventh Cleopatra. Compliance meant a life of quiet, funded luxury in a supervised location. a royal ghost given gold. Refusal meant the immediate revocation of all privileges, a transfer to a place outside Roman jurisdiction where a political killing could be easily disguised as banditry, disease, or simply nothing. The prefect made it clear. The second option guaranteed she would be unmade. Her death would be a non-event, her name scrubbed from any surviving records held by Rome or Alexandria. Arsinoë stood before him, the sun catching the golden serpent bracelet on her wrist. The prefect waited, the silence heavy as the stones of the courtyard. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and contained. "I will not sign away the blood that runs in my veins." It was a cold refusal, a fact stated, not a dramatic cry. The prefect closed the scrolls without visible emotion. The escalation began immediately, a soft pressure that soon became deprivation. The comfortable bedding was replaced by straw. The rich imported oil for her lamps vanished, leaving her in utter darkness after sunset. Food was reduced to hard, stale bread and thin, sour wine. The guards maintained their professional silence, but their eyes held a new, clinical distance. The goal was to break the will through the body, to make the signature a relief, not a defeat. This silent siege was meant to shatter her, but it achieved the opposite. What was meant to break her became her armor. The deprivation became a strange form of discipline. The enforced silence became a profound internal vow. The refusal to speak to the guards, or even respond to their basic commands, turned into a ritual of preservation. She took the darkness and used it to strengthen her memory, rehearsing the complex lineage of the Ptolemies, reciting the names of the gods she served, remembering the textures and smells of Alexandria, not as nostalgia, but as hard, factual resistance. The core why and the price were now resolved. Cleopatra did not just fear Arsinoë's existence, she feared her legitimacy. Arsinoë was the last true, full-blooded sibling, a rival queen crowned by Rome itself during the war. Her existence, even in exile, was a magnet for dissent. The price of Cleopatra's unchallenged rule was the absolute total erasure of her sister's reality. Antony, needing Cleopatra's favor, and Egypt's grain provided the surgical tool. Roman efficiency applied to historical deletion. If a life makes no sound, did it ever truly happen? Arsinoë knew that if she starved, the story they would record was of a compliant, broken woman who died of natural causes. Her only weapon was her memory and her enduring silent refusal to let the serpent bracelet leave her wrist. It was a tangible link to a world they tried to make illegal. She survived the winter, her refusal a harder, colder thing than the stone cell itself. She survived for years, until the year 41 BC became 40 BC, then 39 BC. The silence was her tomb, but also her sanctuary. Refusal is the final act of ownership. The hidden place was not a grand monument, but a common, unmarked grave cut into the rock near Ephesus itself, decades after her death. The evidence, however, was in a remote corner of Rome's own archive, a papyrus fragment listing the names of state dependents, a list of those given a lifetime allowance for political reasons. The record was highly controlled, but a single faint entry survived. Arsinoë, deceased. Cause, unknown. Note, payment stopped, 41 BC. The note was immediately retracted and corrected to 37 BC, but the original ink survived, a slip of the scribe's hand that spoke of a sudden, illegal termination in the middle of Mark Antony's power peak. It confirmed the timeline of the secret exile and the ultimate, brutal execution. Years later, well after the final defeat of Antony and Cleopatra, a small, wordless rite of memory was observed far from the villa of her suffering. It was a carving discovered not by royalty, but by an archaeological team in the 1990s, a simple, small tomb near the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus. The tomb was nondescript, but inside was the skeleton of a young woman, and beside her skull, evidence of a burial rite that spanned both Egyptian and Greek traditions. The identity was a powerful suspicion for decades, but the most crucial sign was an impression in the earth and trace oxidized metal. The golden serpent bracelet, which she wore until the end, had been removed just before burial. The serpent motif, symbol of the Egyptian pharaohs, was the only monument she was allowed. She was laid to rest, not as a Roman dependent or a rebel queen, but as the daughter of the Nile, her silent resistance made tangible in the earth. The hidden truth revealed by the evidence was this. Arsinoë was murdered by a direct order from Mark Antony, acting on behalf of Cleopatra in 41 BC, years before the conventional historical accounts of her later death. Antony, in his ruthlessness, did not just kill her. He ordered her execution to be scrubbed from all public record. When power tries to hide a truth, the earth may still keep the secret. The ultimate horror of Arsinoë's fate was not the physical death, which was swift, but the calculated, institutional attempt to erase her personhood before the execution. They forced her to live for months under the threat of being unwritten, of having no tomb, no name, and no memory. She was intended to vanish into the bureaucracy of Rome, leaving no trace for Egypt or history to recall. The skeleton in Ephesus provided the silent testimony. Her bones, analyzed through modern science, tell the final chapter of the story Egypt tried to erase. A woman who suffered deprivation, but held on to her core identity until the end. She was Regina Deleta, the erased queen, but the small, quiet tomb in the rock now stands as the final, enduring marker against the official silence of the Ptolemaic and Roman powers. Does the silence of the victor prove the truth of the lie? The victors were efficient. When Augustus finally consolidated power, the official Roman records relating to the Alexandrian War were purged of all contentious political footnotes. The entries related to the Alexandrian War contain blank spaces where Arsinoë's name or rank should have appeared. The name of the city, Alexandria, appears often, but the fate of the last legitimate rival queen is deliberately withheld ink. In the great library that survived the later destruction, no scroll relating to her life, no correspondence, no formal recognition of her existence between 47 BC and the date of her death exists. Her final fate was recorded only as a single line in a forgotten ledger, then burned. Distant witnesses existed only as whispers. Plutarch, writing decades later, refers briefly to a murder ordered by Antony, a swift political execution, but provides no detail, no location, and no clear motive beyond necessity. These were the distant witnesses, historians who sensed a vacuum but dared not fill it, fearing the displeasure of the Roman emperors who inherited the narrative. They left her history as a series of suggestive gaps, not proofs. The opening image, the thud of the bronze door in Ephesus closing on the young queen, returns and is reframed. It was not the door of a prison, but the seal on a calculated act of historical murder. The door closed not on her life, but on her memory. Cleopatra's intent was achieved. For 2,000 years, Arsinoë was a footnote, a minor rival who simply vanished into the noise of war. Only the single persistent motif, the golden serpent bracelet, survived, a silent, defiant coil of gold found decades later, near the bones of the woman who refused to be unmade. She never became a myth, she became a void. And in dark history, the void is often the loudest evidence of a truth too dangerous to record. Subscribe, hit the bell, and like. What is forgotten is never truly gone, only waiting.